So the chapter 6 is boundaries to love and animals. It's from Bioethics' Love of Life. This book has a lot of pictures again. Animals also have rules of behavior. How much decision making that they make is conscious. All living organisms are biological beings and share a common and intertwined biological heritage. Humans are members of the species Homo sapiens, one of the millions of species alive on the planet Earth. Fundamentally, we must ask whether humans are a special form of life, different from other living creatures. We must also compare humans with other species and see where the differences may be. We may also look at individual humans and ask whether there is any significant difference between individual members of the human species that could influence the ethical duties we have to them. Many philosophers consider sexuality in humans to be a drive that is basically the same as in other animals. But love they see as something totally different from any biological category. However, as we have seen in the discussion of eros and self-love, the components of love are not so easily separated in humans, and therefore we cannot dismiss animals as possessing only sexual love. While it's accepted that all human beings that can think possess unique moral wills, which is the basis for autonomy, did this capacity suddenly jump into the mind after biological evolution? The data below suggests some animals also have some capacity for free moral judgment. Human beings are created in the midst of an intricate biodiversity, which is yet to be comprehended. The process or timescale over which all life was made is not so remarkable as the species and ecosystems that we have today, or those that we can see from the fossils. Biological data tells us that all human beings have the same basic set of genes. The variation found in one population covers almost all the total variation. And humans share a common male and female African ancestor. Changes in DNA sequences have also been used to trace the way that different organisms evolve, called phylogenetic trees. We can compare the DNA of species alive today and investigate trends in the sequence change. And we can also look at DNA from past organisms, which is a more direct measure of the change over time. The concept of love is applied to love of animals and the love of nature and is found in many cultures. In Maori, the word aroha is used to denote something broader than love, that includes a oneness with nature and animals. Bioethics has origins in exploring human relationships with animals and with nature, and this chapter explores the former and the following chapter the later. Many of the questions are related to questions discussed in the previous chapters that are common in medical ethics, like what's a person and what is natural. Section 6.1 is the persons and autonomy. So this is Bioethics' Love of Life book, section 6.1. If we want to debate the issues of the boundaries of birth, death, quality of life, and species, we must ask what constitutes a person. The first figure has me at a sign of Glendora High School in Glendora in Los Angeles. Places in our ontological development. When we visit places where we spent a day before, 40 years ago, it can remind us of the development of a person. So I spent, before this day, 40 years before, I spent one day at this high school in California. It was a cultural shock. I never thought I'd come back to visit this country or to live it, but it was interesting. The word person comes from the Greek persona, meaning an appearance or a face, an individual appearance that has continuity through a story. Animals change with time and experience. Persons grow, creating themselves. From birth, most human beings become rational, self-aware, and through our childhood we learn and are molded as our genes interact with each other and the environment. This means a person in an intrinsic sense, coming from some character possessed by the person themselves. Human beings can also be treated as persons in a linguistic way, by names and by ascribing emotions. Parents can do this as they interact with the infants in terms of psychological attributes that they assign to the infant, and may do this to domestic animals too. Commonly pets are given a name, and this may be also extended to plants and physical objects like boats, computers and cars. This is an extrinsic value given by someone else to something. In human society, a person is generally referred to as someone who is rational, capable of free choices, and is coherent, continuing an autonomous center of sensations, experiences, emotions, volitions, and actions. These are what may be called the characters of a person. A crucial part of our person is self-awareness, or personal identity. Personal identity is our selfhood, only finds its growth in social relationships. We are made fully human by our web of social relationships. However, if a person loses the capacity to communicate with others, but can receive sensory input, we still consider that a person. During fetal life, the characters of personhood are apparent in increasing ways. It is clear that the biological qualities of personhood are not present at conception. The earlier embryo or conceptus does not manifest characters and activities of a human person. It is a potential human person at the biological level, at least, rather than a human person with potential. To function as a human person, a brain is needed. In a parallel world with the brain death, the criteria used by some is brain life. The brain develops gradually, so it's difficult to mark a particular time when a sudden change occurs. Another approach, founded in ancient Greek or Christian thought, stresses being more than behaving. When a human possesses a soul, they are a person. In Christian terms, a human is someone made in the image of God, which is not dependent on a criteria of actions. One of the important reasons for religions to place high value on human life is belief in the soul. Each individual is precious and unique because they possess a soul, a spiritual status. The body, soul, and spirit of a human individual are not separated but are integral in the Christian view. Before an individual becomes a self-aware person, they may possess a soul. The timing of the beginning of a human individual activity coincides with the time of ensoulment, which I've discussed elsewhere in the book Shaping Genes. It's generally believed there's no intermediate in the animal kingdom, although some animals may possess souls. If the soul is from God, then it's not necessary to envisage intermediates, but the threshold can be crossed in a single step between human and animal instinct and human reflection. The timing of ensoulment in humans does vary between different religions, within people of the same religion. In a tradition where the presence of the soul is a source of autonomy and protecting human life, the characters of personhood are less important in assigning autonomy. There has been much debate on the time when a human fetus has a soul, although few now consider it to be at the time of conception. Rather, it may be at the time of individualization at 14 days when the primitive streak appears, or when there is no chance for recombination of two embryos to form one. Others put it at the formation of neural tissues and a functioning nervous system, and others at quickening. These questions have informed debates on human embryo experimentation and abortion, but the most common argument on abortion is for law is the viability of a fetus from the mother. Almost all people accept that causing suffering is bad, and the principle to do no harm is assumed to be a universal ideal, but it is less often applied to other species. In this discussion of persons, we have to look at the evidence suggesting that some other animals may be persons intrinsically, in the same category of use that we use for humans. We can discuss this in terms of individuals, though our study of individual animals informs our understanding of the normal range of traits for species in general. In most religions, there are verses implying some animals may have a soul, or at least a way of worship. The Prophet Muhammad divided creatures into angels, men, and beasts. God the Most High created the angels and placed within them the intellect. He created the beasts and placed within them sensuality. And he created the children of Adam and placed within them both intellect and sensuality. So he whose intellect dominates his sensuality is higher than the angels, and he whose sensuality dominates his intellect is lower than the beasts. This verse also shows a distinction between angelic men, ordinary men, and bestial men. Animals are not given religious prescriptions, although they are widely used as images in religion for millennia. Whether the soul of a chimpanzee is different to a human soul has been debated for millennia, and is a question already found in many religions. It's a question only God can answer, not humans. It's a non-scientific question, like many other important questions of bioethics, the value of life, the value of love, the meaning of existence. Scientific questions are those we can disprove by experiment, and there are many that we cannot. The concept of evolution means we see humans as living creatures derived from other living forms, and we can look at the evolution of all behavioral traits, including love. The presence of a person also denotes an individual existence. There are two ways to consider an individual. One is from the point of view of self-awareness, and the other is inside a group, whether an individual is recognized as a distinct person. In some animal species, both are true, and we might also regard them as worthy of more respect, as persons of a different species, than if they were not distinct persons. Dolphins have an interesting response to killer whales or sharks, to come together very closely and swim as one, so that the predator cannot distinguish any one individual to target. Yet at the same time, each dolphin has unique whistle sounds, and they not only have a long nurture period, but also long-lasting cooperative relationships with other individuals, friendships. And they have often been long revered. There are some pictures of these. Figure 6.2, Animals and Religion. A naga is a snake, a holy image of snakes in Thailand. So snakes in Thailand and in India, these are holy animals, spiritual animals. The live cows can be holy in temples in India, and in fact can be living temples. Okay. The third picture is a fox is in a shrine in Kyoto, in Japan. There is a fox temple. It's a shrine, a Shinto shrine, and lots of foxes. Figure 6.3 is a picture of rams in a temple in Luxor in Egypt. This is a temple used for worship about 4,000 years ago. Again, the image of rams is a holy animal. Many people accept that all humans are equal in moral status, and all humans are superior in moral status to non-human animals. From these two moral principles, they put human welfare ahead of animal suffering. Peter Singer argues that these two moral principles cannot be defended within the terms of a non-religious approach to ethics. He concludes that there is no rational ethical justification for always putting human suffering ahead of that of non-human animals. He argues that if we are considering public policy in a pluralistic society, we should not take a particular religious outlook as a basis for our laws. But we can ask, do we need to take a rational utilitarian philosophy as a basis for public policy? That's a counter question back to Singer. Many different people's cultural and religious views are more consistent with human beings having a higher moral status than animals, and these views may have been more in common with each other than the rationalistic philosophy of academics. There are some fundamental questions about who should decide this, however, and it needs to be considered at greater length. Figure 6.4 is a tanuki. Tanuki is a Japanese raccoon. Tanukis, and this is a temple, a Buddhist temple in Tatabayashi in Japan, with lots of tanukis. Tanukis are an interesting animal in Japan. They're considered a little bit of a naughty animal. Sometimes you'll see them outside shops, and often you'll see, for the male tanukis, very enlarged genitalia in the statues. Okay. And often they have very big round tummies, suggesting indulgent animals. Reading on, however, it's still important to summarize Singer's argument, as it does have consequences for the way we regard animals, and concludes that we should improve their treatment. The problem with saying that humans are of higher moral status than animals is that while human species may have higher mental capacities than animals, not all people do. The word speciesism is used to argue that by rational philosophy we cannot prove that we owe the human species any more ethical duties than we owe animal species. We should focus on the individual when considering ethics, which has been a focus of movements against sexual or racial discrimination also. The focus of movements against these movements, sexual discrimination, has led to reform in human rights and civil rights. Singer argues that we should consider all beings who can suffer in a moral consideration, regardless of the species. However, he would still not say that the deaths of animals are equal to the deaths of all humans, as there are additional moral factors such as the awareness of the future that animals have, which most animals do not, which humans have, which most animals do not have. To kill a human being destroys all the plans they've made, a feature of humans. He also acknowledges the importance of extrinsic moral factors such as the feelings of family members if one dies. Though this is also shared with some other familial mammals. Basically, if the animals are persons in their own sense, they have also extrinsic aspects. In the conclusion of the book Good-Natured, Franz de Waal makes a poignant comment. Animals are no moral philosophers, but then how many people are? We find few people who use deep moral principles to consider the consequences before they act. We can also think of how many of our daily activities we actually make moral judgments about. A chimpanzee sharing food with a hungry companion cannot be distinguished from a person working in a soup kitchen to give soup to a hungry person. De Waal makes a list of the following capacities found in other species that are necessary for human morality. 1. Sympathy-related traits, attachments, succulence, and emotional connotation. Learned attachment to and special treatment of the disabled and injured. Ability to trade places mentally with others, which is we call cognitive empathy. 2. Norm-related characteristics. Prescriptive social rules, internalization of rules, and anticipation of punishment. 3. Reciprocity. The concept of giving, trading, and revenge. Moralistic aggression against violators or reciprocity rules. 4. Getting along. Peacemaking and avoidance of conflict. Community concern and maintenance of good relationships. Accommodation of conflicting interests through negotiation. There are many species which allow different levels of the above characters, and we should treat them after considering the level of the autonomy that they have. Rather than expecting animals to speak the same language or humans as human being language, we should examine the actions and behavior, the same criteria we use to examine true love from mere words in human beings. Many human persons have difficulty expressing the language of ethics and principles, but it does not mean that they lack the values and need used for balancing and making decisions. The same can be asked of members of other species. Okay, so many people are not moral philosophers, but we treat them ethically. What about animals? They may not be moral philosophers. So let's see. Now the pictures. There's a sacred bull, Nandi, in a temple in Tamil Nadu in India. Figure 6.6 has a picture of a mountain goat in Banff National Park, Canada. Many animals walk along particular paths and choose where to go. This is autonomy, self-rule. A Roman mosaic of dolphins is the second picture. Dolphins have long been revered in legends and stories for their relationships with humans, and accounts from around the world record them as saving human life over history. Next, wild elephants in Peria Tiger Reserve in Kerala, with a brain size triple that in humans. Elephants are known to mourn for lost members of the herd for many years in the past, revisiting where they died. Okay, so several species have brains larger than human beings. One are elephants, the brain is 3 times the size, and some whales have larger brains than human beings. Finally, we can see, in this pet chipmunk or chipmunk outside getting given peanuts. People try to relate to animals and give them names, and even names for their path, chipmunk crossing. Interesting that wild animals live close to human beings because human beings give them peanuts and other treats. Who is a pet of who is another question. And figure 6.7 has an interesting picture of dolphins, dogs, and humans enjoying an encounter. Okay? So this is a trans-species encounter between the dolphin, the dogs, and the people, okay, on a dolphin exploring boat. And many tourist companies now could take people for dolphin encounters in the ocean. Okay, so that's the first chapter, 6.1. I would briefly pause if anyone has an immediate question. Any question on the words we've read? We will discuss the content later, but in terms of the words, any comments? And your comments, Ronnie, animals have their own religion. Yes, so as I mentioned, the chimpanzees doing a rain dance is being recorded. In terms of what level of religion or spirituality they have, and if they discuss concepts of God in their language, we need to understand more about that. And yes, human beings, again, very interesting comments on the history of religion. What sort of religion do you prefer? Do you prefer this systematic religion, worshipping idols of statues, or worshipping figures of human history, saying that they're the Son of God, which as a Christian is something which, looking back on it, is something which Christians do? Do they worship images of a Buddha, another human being? Do they worship revelations of a text that's meant to have been delivered from God through different human agents? Or why not worship trees, the sun, the moon? Isn't this more natural? And we can clearly understand people worshipping elements of nature. It seems something easier to see. And yes, it's quite clear. For example, when animals sing to the moon, in the full moon, you'll see coyotes singing and wolves singing. Is that a worship? The sounds of worship? Is it communication? Is it a mating call? Okay. They may say the same thing when they look at human beings and say, what are these people going into this place to do? Okay, so these are interesting questions. Does anyone else have any question or comment? You can also type, of course, the comments. Please increase your volume then.
Yeah. I'll back it up now. Lena says there's one other group that Mohammed threw in there with men, angels, and beasts. She said genies. They're invisible, they live a long time, but they're also in that group.
And so genies are there too. It'd be interesting, you can ask her to send the link for this.
Okay. I'll have her do that.
And maybe, I don't know if anyone has their own genie. Genies were very...
in this, particularly in this India, Bangladesh, Pakistan kind of Asian part of the world, the concept of genie is there very much. And in our Quran, basically, it's been mentioned that the same way the science and the literature that you are reading through the book, it's almost similar. The citation is in Quran that human are made superior species than the animal, and then the angel are made even superior than the human, in between the human are. So it is very interesting, when you are reading, I'm just trying to relate that knowledge as well. It's very interesting. Science and religion, when it mixes up, it really gives a good sense. The thing is, I really want to share, because you mentioned about the human as a person counting, like when a kind of a living human is considered as a person. So there is a lot of fight, because I as a being a doctor, when we go for our abortion and menstrual regulation decision making in the reproductive and sexual health, there's a lot of fight around this, because the woman, when the woman goes for abortion, even within the woman herself, she sometimes goes for a long, she just calls for a longer time just to decide, because there's a moral fight inside. It's like a kind of pro-life versus pro-choice. So whether I should safeguard my body is my choice, or I should think about the life. And then the question is when the life begins. Because there is a medical citation is that, as you mentioned, that within 14 days or 16 days, the heart, it starts. And then the quickening within 3 months. And within the 4 months, there's another. So which should be the cutoff point? It is so debatable, and within the human, as a person, the fight is there, and within the even provider level, the fight is there. And because of that, in our country, there are lots of women used to die in the past because of this abortion was illegal, and then there was a redefinition that has been made in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India. Even some of the Catholic countries like Philippines and many other countries, they adopted our definition, because our definition is very tricky definition, It is like, it is menstrual regulation is an interim method for establishing non-pregnancy. Such an interim mechanism and such a way of establishing non-pregnancy, it doesn't mean that you are pregnant whether or not, just justifying yourself, and the provider justify the ethical point. Okay, so this is a very tricky definition, and the menstrual regulation has been accepted in the government health policy. So, and because of the menstrual regulation, there are a lot more safeguarding of the woman of abortion risk taking. So this is one very interesting, issue, just to think, and morality, how guide you, and then how the health risk, morality versus health risk. This is one very interesting thing, and you really mentioned about your discussion as well, and I was trying to relate that very interesting way. And also, one of the geographical channel I found the relationship of the is a task-specific relationship, or how I can define, I don't know. Like, the uncommon animals which shouldn't be together, but they're cohabiting in a very interesting way. And there was very interesting mention about that. Once a snake with one of the, I don't know the English name of that. This is a very, thorny body. Then animal is very thorny. So the snake and that animal has always a fight to each other. But they were living in a very kind of friendly and love relationship, and that was explained in the geographical documentary channel in some part of the world, I forgot. So it's interesting, like, and what is the domain of thinking that really guide this love of the animal and the love of the human?
Okay, thank you for your comments. Does anyone else have any questions on the chapter or comments? I want to...
Yeah?
You go ahead. Yeah.
There is also an observation that some animals ask for help for a human being. Where, for example, here there is where an okra asked the human diver to free from fishing line. So we also have where animal actively ask human for help, which is rarely spoken about.
Yeah. Yes, it's very interesting. Thank you for sending the video link. And it links exactly into the context. Thank you also, Shahanas. I have opened that page, animals said to have spiritual experiences, and because basically it says, for those who followed Shahanas' link, neurologists and other scientists argue animals are capable of having spiritual experiences. The researchers hold that spiritual experiences originate within primitive parts of the human brain, structures shared by all animals. The challenge lies in proving what animals experience. Animals, not just people, likely have spiritual experiences. So this is a interesting, and you can see the Neurology Journal study determined that the out-of-body experiences of humans are likely caused by the brain's arousal system. Okay, and so it's an interesting link, and following up. Possibly we can have another discussion on spirituality in animals. It's going to be an interesting topic. So I think that feeds on and the dolphin communication and the rescue to the second chapter, second part section 6.2, Evolution of Altruism and Love. You may have seen, I suggest you watch the Charlton Heston version of Planet of the Apes. This is the original costumes from the planet. It's in the Hollywood Museum in Hollywood. You can go and see, and it's the original masks that Roddy McDowell and other actors used as the apes are there. And it raised a number of animal questions. So the evolution of altruism and love, I'll read on, and page 123. One of the categories that's central to the ethical approach based on the love of life is whether animals are also capable of loving others. In evolution, it's assumed that selfishness is required for selection. Natural selection means survival of the fittest, and selfish behavior allows an individual to leave more offspring. Evolution of altruism and love. At the genetic level, it means a selfish gene will try to replicate itself and leave more progeny. If a gene does not do this, it will not last. When we look at animals, we see that some animals exhibit non-selfish behavior, called altruism. Some even give when there is no hope to receive any genetic benefit, helping unrelated individuals. We must therefore ask the question, is altruism the basis for love? Altruism is found in many species, and this led to the development of sociobiology, the study of animal behavior from an evolutionary perspective. If love is the basis for ethics, we have several options. We love everything, or we love things we like, partiality, or should we love something more if it can show love, reciprocity. In terms of evolution, the most likely origin of love would be as a reciprocal tit-for-tat system of mutual reward that promote selective advantage to those who cooperate sometimes compared to those who do not. As Wright reviewed theories of evolution for a gene for brotherly love, we can also see the advantages to survival if the community has love for each other in all social animals. However, there are limits to this love. J.B.S. Haldane is said to have said he would never give his life for a brother, but rather for 2 brothers or 8 cousins. This equals the proportion of genes that they share with us. So if you understand as a geneticist what he's saying, okay, his brother has half his genes, okay? But 2 brothers, 2 halves equal 1. Okay, so equal genetically to him. So he gives his life for 2 brothers, but not for 1 brother, because 1 brother only has half his genes. The 2 brothers have equivalent to his genes. And 8 cousins, these have the same genetic equivalence to yourself. Okay? So that was an interesting comment from a mathematician, a geneticist, Haldane. We can also look at some interesting examples among animals of altruism and analyze this from the viewpoint of natural selection, asking why that behavior would survive. One example is warning calls of individual birds, which may put them at the higher danger of being targeted, but warns a group of a predator, so they can all take flight or prepare for defense. Vampire bats are not our image of a loving animal, but unrelated bats in the same colony may feed each other. If one bat is successful and another unsuccessful, the successful one may feed another. If one bat is successful and another unsuccessful, this is what they do. So this is called reciprocal altruism, because the bats may reciprocate on another night. And we read 2 weeks ago, those of you in the paper Expanding the Circle discussion, we saw that. This behavior can be mathematically modeled in such a way to show that it could be a selective advantage for these bats, because they meet frequently, and by helping each other, they may help themselves leave more offspring. We have numerous examples in the animal kingdom of reciprocal altruism within species, but few between species. Okay? So here we have reciprocal altruism. So within the species, dog helps dog, human helps human. But there are few examples between different species. But we have dolphin helps people, people help dolphin, dog helps dolphin, dolphin helps dog. These are examples of reciprocal altruism. Altruism within the species is supported by kin selection. The genes may be promoted through survival of any member of a species that has the genes, not only by the individual or the immediate family. But between species, there's no specific reason to risk life for another, or even to spend vital energy and resources on saving another species at the cost of decreased promotion of the genes of the species itself. So those species which favor their own species over any other individual of another species could be called speciesist. In the same way that racism or sexism are biases, so is speciesism. Human beings are generally speciesist also. Peter Singer argues that pains of the same intensity and duration are equally bad whether felt by humans or animals, and we should not be prepared to inflict pain on other animals that we would not bear ourselves unless there's some overwhelming justification for it. Some of the examples of interspecies altruism are stories of dolphins saving drowning humans in the ocean that are found throughout history and throughout the world. Cases have been documented on videos of dolphins saving people who lie face down in the water. In order to understand how animals behave and how we should behave to others, we need to look at our biological, social, and spiritual origins. Biologically, much is needed on genetic analysis. The DNA sequences of the human genome suggest that up to 75% may be involved in determining our behavior. Behavior is influenced by both genes and the environment. The complete genetic sequence of many species allows comparisons of the genetic similarities and differences between animals. Humans are primates, and the species most related to humans are chimpanzees. And we're in a small group of higher primates, including orangutans, gibbons, and gorillas. The genetic sequence data shows there's greater similarity between chimpanzees and human beings. Less than 100 genes different between these two species. The similarity was a shock to many of us, especially considering some people still deny the similarity we already know. What is psychologically difficult to accept is when sociobiologists begin to trace the origins of our ethical behavior, we can see behavioral patterns in all animals, and increasingly sophisticated ones in so-called higher animals. The origins of our selfishness and altruistic giving behavior are fundamental to how we behave. Excessive concern with personal autonomy could be called selfishness. And there's obviously a balance between too little recognition of autonomy, which is against the dignity of a person, and too much, which can clash with justice as discussed below. Autonomy should not be the most valuable principle of bioethics, even if it is the most dominant feature of some forms of human behavior. The Jewish, Christian, Islamic religions say that humans were made in the image of God, Genesis 1:26-27. So what is this image? Part of this image is what we could call the human soul, as discussed above. Another approach to investigating the soul is to look for characteristics that have claimed to make humans higher than animals, and which some people say reveal the soul. And if you look at any textbook, old-fashioned textbook, you will see some of these characters listed as characteristics of why human beings are special. Gradually we've found, however, these characters such as intelligence and intellect and language ability, the known differences are decreasing. It's very difficult to estimate the language ability of animals who use different communication systems. One way to examine the complexity of the language would be to eliminate most animals from being close to humans, but there'd still be some doubts over some. It's been found that chimpanzees and gorillas can be taught sign language. And these chimpanzees, gorillas such as Koko, Kanzi, Washo, Ai, these are famous individuals. And they talk to humans in it, but only to the extent of composing 2 or 3 word sentence replies. This sentence structure represents a stage equivalent to a human baby learning to talk before they can start to make longer sentences. However, they can communicate their needs and desires through this medium, and even gone on internet for conversations with human beings. In our class today on Skype, I don't have any chimpanzees, okay? But in some classes you can have chimpanzees. Maybe it will be an interesting feature. We have a chimpanzee for a class as a guest. This ability to communicate gives at least them some certain rights. And together with social evidence, some claim we should give the higher primates, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, and humans equal rights in what's called the Great Ape Project. Confucius in the Analects wrote the presence of Jian, human-heartedness, the extension of acts of perfection, patience, and understanding, designates a human being as opposed to an animal. Jian is an embodiment of goodness, wisdom, and courage in a descending order of importance. In a wider sense, it refers to a person who possesses the virtues of kindness, gentleness, humaneness, and unselfishness. If we can find these characters in animals, then we could say that they too possess Jian, a similar concept to altruism and love. James Rachel's in Created from Animals, the book, advances the view that in secular philosophy we should not be speciesists, but judge animals as individuals with differing moral worth, which may be similar to humans. The sensitivity to pain and capacity for intelligent behavior are the main qualities we should use to judge whether to use an organism for human ends, as is discussed later in this chapter in the section on animals. The book claims that Darwinism has undermined theological underpinnings of human superiority over animals, which is something many people will refute, especially those who are religious. At the other extreme, the views of Aquinas, who thought animals have no rights, are incompatible with what we know about the biological continuum between animals and humans. We can argue for religious differences between the point at which we violate the rights of humans and animals, or use the language of duties. But we certainly have duties to some animals based on their characteristics, which are increasingly becoming aware of. Our ethics must be built on the knowledge that we have, and change when the knowledge informs us of new ethically important qualities of animals, such as pain, self-awareness, and rationality. There are dangers to having respect for life dependent upon revealed characters of behavior, or an act-centered definition, because not all individuals are able to show acts or even have the potential for future acts. In conclusion, we must broaden our horizons to look at the autonomy of all organisms. Paternal love has been discussed above. In the case of human cultures, it is universal, and it's also usual across species as well. In some species at least, males or females have genetically programmed roles in the raising of offspring. Animal studies and human experience show that fathers can raise offspring, and maternalism is shared by both species. Although a mother gives birth to the child, the father can care for the offspring. Sometimes it's actually an unusual practice. In other cases it may be induced if the mother is absent. Parental care can tie up resources, but if the offspring will die, parents who want to have offspring continue until reproductive age must nurture them. Parent-offspring behavior must be stable for the next generation for the offspring to become successful parents. This means that while children can ask for food, they cannot ask for too much, or else the parents will die. The genes for this behavior must be balanced. This can be done by making the food requests also costly, which is consistent with observed behavior in some species. So while maternal care is the most common behavior for animals, because it does involve considerable resource cost, there are many insect species that appear to have developed deviations from the standard of maternal care commitments. Okay, so they may have a mother bee, for example, a queen bee, which is different. Many individuals may no longer be involved in the mothering. There are two figures here. Figure 6.7, the emergence of altruism and social instincts in animals. Japanese monkeys are grooming. The grooming of fellow troop members can build up a community spirit. Do you sometimes groom other people? Elephant seals on the California beach. Colonies of seals found around the world have complex social hierarchies. And this penguin colony, the third picture, in Oamaru, New Zealand, they use an old shipping pier, and it's full of penguins. No longer used by human beings, but this is used by penguins as a colony. Beehives. Beehives and examples, this is beehives in Hungary. Beehives keep the bees together, social animals. Frans de Waal looked at the origins of right and wrong in different animals. Sympathy is a character at least seen in dolphins and whales. Dolphins have been videoed saving companions by biting through harpoon lines and hauling them out of fishing nets. The sympathy shown by whales to other members of their pod, once injured, is used by whalers, so that once a sperm whale is harpooned, other members of the pod will encircle the boat trying to help the injured companion, while the whalers find it easy to kill many more. Okay. Sympathy in this case means both recognizing someone else's pain, empathy, and doing something about it. And we also know cases of dolphins saving human lives. In human beings, kissing is a sign of affection, which is thought to have its origins in transfer of masticated food. Kissing without transfer of food is seen also in chimpanzees and bonobos, also tonkas. Looking at handicapped persons is also observed in primates, looking after them. In a chimpanzee colony in Arnhem, the oldest male was found to purposely limp when he could be seen by his rival male, in what was perceived as a case of pretending to be in pain and suffering, so he would not be challenged. Okay, because if he looked fit, the other male would take control of the colony. But here, when he's seen, he's looked at, seemed to be limping, as a deceitfully limping, so the other male will not take, combat him. A study of human babies even found that even year-old babies will try to comfort family members who are pretending to be sick, with behavior like patting, hugging, and rubbing the victim's hurt. However, studies of rhesus monkeys find that very seldom is sympathy for hurt expressed, although grooming is seen. So the behavior towards a weaker playmate may either be a learned adjustment, in which it's learned that the weaker playmate will not stand rough play, or cognitive empathy, in which one can put oneself in another's individual situation. Please everyone mute your microphone. Okay? Sympathy is also seen. Please, some people don't have a microphone muted. Could you please mute your microphone? As empathy for other people trying to listen. Sympathy is also seen in other mammalian species upon death. For example, elephants will sometimes pick up ivory or bones of a dead herd member, hold pieces in their trunks and pass them around. Some return for many years to the spot where a relative died, touching the relics. It makes us ask whether they remember. Elephants are the only land mammals with brains larger than humans, actually 3 times the mass. A sperm whale has a brain mass 6 times that of a human being. There are many cases in dolphins and primates and cases in lemurs that protect injured individuals. Given that human beings take pleasure in comforting the sick and seeing someone get better, it's not surprising that other species also show signs of sympathy and love towards others. Culture-specific tool use and language has also been observed in different communities of chimpanzees and bonobos as evidence of learning not in genes. The tit-for-tat between leaders and supporters reminiscent of human politics has also been observed in other primates. Figure 6.9 looks at the hunting. If you enlarge it, you see lion hunting led to the disappearance from many habitats. This is lion hunting in Assyrian marbles in the British Museum. 3,000 years ago, tigers were hunted, and now there are few alive. Turtle cells are used for traditional Chinese medicine, but they're an endangered species. So the evolution of the ability to deceive others, to lie and to be morally deceptive, also appears to be something that requires complex mental processes only seen in higher animals. The term Machiavellian intelligence is used after the book The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli to define the ability to outwit another person through cunning and deceit. The ability to read another's mind may be considered necessary to allow deceit, and a test called the Salian test has found that children of about 4 years old suddenly learn how to deceive others. In the test, the child watches Sally, a doll, place a marble in the basket. Then Sally leaves and Anne comes and moves the marble to a box. Then she leaves and Sally returns. Asked where Sally will look for the marble when she returns, young children indicate the box because they cannot distinguish what they know after seeing Anne and what Sally knows. Okay, but later they understand she's going to look for the box, for the marble where it originally was placed, because that's what she understands. Other researchers use other observation methods to find deceit earlier. For example, in a playgroup, one child might pretend they do not like their favorite toy, so others will also ignore it. Okay? Because often in a playgroup, children fight over the favorite toy. You take one toy, somebody else will say, I want that toy. If you're very clever, you will take a toy you don't want, and then other people will come and take it from you, and then you're left with the toy that you really wanted. Okay? And this is a sign of children's intelligence as well. Of course, it also linked to social hierarchy. If you're the biggest and bulliest child, or the strongest, nobody's going to take the toy off you. But for many clever kids, the toy will be taken away by stronger kids. So then you can play with them and they get your toy in the end. Friendship between different species has been widely noted and may have been experienced by many readers. Companionship can lead to dependence upon others, or often seen in the fretting of dogs for owners who die or disappear. Cases of purposes that starve to death after disappearance of a human companion have also been noted. So these purposes are used to a human companion, swimming with him, living with him. When the human companion goes, they maybe fret and they worry. In a book, Lauren Esseley, 1964, in The Unexpected Universe, said, "One does not meet oneself until one catches the reflection in an eye other than human." Okay, so when you see your reflection in the eye of another species looking at you, he's saying then you meet yourself. Figure 6.4 looks at some ways to raise animals for food. A flock of sheep in New Zealand. Enclosed by fences, the sheep are eating the grass, pretty happy. The next is a picture of battery farming of chickens. There's not much space for these animals to walk around in the life of a battery chicken. In fact, they're crammed into their cages. And the next one, a herd of cattle in the green part of Australia. The environment where they live would maybe be the envy of many people. It's a marked contrast to the factory farm approach to animal production. Of course, the cattle in some parts of Australia live in the arid area, the desert. It's much tougher, but if you live in dairy cows, usually they put a lot of grass, make it very rich for the animals and easy to eat, and a lot of meat production. So it's probably a happy place. Interesting question, is it better to be stronger or cleverer when you are a child? Good question. We can see what other people think. I think it's probably better to be clever, because it means you're probably going to be clever later on and it's going to lead to a better outcome. But being too weak may mean you're bullied. Any comments on this question? Any psychologists who'd like to make a comment? Is it better to be stronger or cleverer when you're a child? Will you be happier?
Well, is it like a question of survival of the fittest kind of? Like, the more you are stronger, the more you are survived. So, altruism sense and the survival fight sometimes is related.
Yes, so sometimes it's related to the question, survival of the fittest, but the fittest in this case may be intelligent. The fittest could be the intelligent child, may be able to outcompete the stronger one. In this case, so that's the question. And again, when we consider fitness, if we go back, we were looking at the development of ability for deception in Machiavellian intelligence. So in the Prince, then being cunning and able to deceive is a character which you need as from being clever or intelligent. Okay, so if these kids are learning how to deceive at the age of 4, and then if they can use that, it may be used for the advantage. Okay. So that's
this kind of fight of the toys, Darryl, with the intelligent children or the children with upper social advantage have the better, benefits of gaining. So this is one way of looking. And then what about the animals? Like when they have a kind of similar kind of altruism, selfishness, and fighting over foods. So is it the intelligence or the muscle skill, or which one has the upper hand?
I think it depends on the classroom situation. Probably in most, I guess, regulated classes, the one who is more clever will in the end get a upper hand. But if they get it without social cohesion, you can have individual problems. So that somebody who's stronger and not so clever may be very upset with this arrangement. So that's why you can see also the evolution of altruism. That altruism can evolve through the need for social cohesion and a survival advantage. Okay, so when we look at that altruistic evolution, then I think we have some of the advantage. So this pure selfish gene, survival of the fittest, doesn't work, and even in some non-animal species it doesn't work. We see in some plants, for example, lichen. Lichen is a mixture of a fungus and a bacteria. Survival of the fittest works by cooperating. So in many other species besides human beings, and we can see this in our own body, which we call human beings. Our human body has for every one human cell, we have hundreds of bacterial cells, and the number of species, the different genomes in our body is thousands, and these are important for our survival. They cooperate together. Okay, so that cooperation is seen even with the bacterial system that you have as yourself. So you may think, I'm a Homo sapien, but actually you're not. You're a human being, and a human being has thousands of microorganisms which make you healthy. So that's an important aspect. So we are a living ecosystem and a sign of altruism in that sense.
Yeah, it's a very interesting science. Very interesting science.
Any other comments on section 6.2?
One I just want to, you shared about the love, altruism and relationship of animal versus human, and at one point you mentioned about the love of animal has got the love also. So that, and sometimes within self-love there is an altruism or selfish fighting to that as well. But the difference of human love and animal love may be the possessivism or selfishness is in both is there, but human relationship is more more sensual, more kind of it has got more respect into it and has got interdependency, and it is more kind of, when it is in love there is a longer time. But for the animals maybe there's the similar kind of love is there, but the time or the trust of relationships is not in that way like human. Is this the difference, or how do you think?
Okay. So does anybody else have any questions or comments before I respond? Okay, so of course the immediate... go ahead.
I have one question.
Yep, go ahead, I'll gather questions. Yep.
Hello?
Hello,
Yeah.
Faria.
Yeah, I have a question that we, the human being or the Homo sapiens, sometimes they take animals as pet and they feed them, they help them, but sometimes they leave them. And for example, the very dearest pet, they throw them away in an unknown place or a place far away from their home or the place where they live. But it also happens that those animals, especially like the dog, they come back, and it's being said usually that if animal is very close to a human being, they do not betray, but in other way around, the human being, they betray with the animals. So why it happens? My question is why it happens. Is it the nature of the human, Homo sapiens or human being? They are not being trusted, or because animals don't leave them, but they can leave them very easily. So why it happens?
Okay, thank you. So yes, it's good you made the counterpoint. Anybody else have any comment or question before I respond? And Ronnie's comment. So it's also an interesting question. Polygamy and monogamy, it relates to the question that Nazneen was raising, and Faria. So some of you have read other chapters of Bioethics' Love of Life, and you'll see some of the definitions of love and its discussion. I've put a few of the earlier videos of other chapters on the YouTube channel, so you can choose chapters 2, 3, and chapter 7. I'm going to put this on, that's why I'm videoing, I'm going to put this chapter on later. So I think we have no evidence at all to suggest that love in human beings is anything superior or inferior to love in other animals. We can say that 75% of the genes of human beings are expressed in the brain, same percentage in great apes, many intelligent species. For example, why do octopus, when they meet each other, shake hands? Okay? Basically, octopus, they have 8 legs. When the two octopus meet each other, they put out one of the legs to each other. Okay? It's very similar to a social custom which some of you use, which is called shaking hands. Why do albatrosses mate for life, and they will not find another partner? Why are human beings polygamous? Okay. So these are questions. So we can't really say that one species is the love or sensuality is superior or inferior to another. We don't really know. And if we measure love in terms of devotion to self-sacrifice, then obviously ants and bees are self-sacrificing insect species. Does love have to have a conscious decision? Well, these are some things we'll see in the other chapters. But these are why it's very interesting to look at evolution of altruism and love. And as I said, altruism, therefore, if you look at it from an evolutionary perspective, whether it's genetic, social, or spiritual evolution, we can see it in all the in other species as well. So the next section, section 1.3, ethical limits of animal use. I'll start reading. In most people's minds, there are differences between animals and plants. Philosophers can argue that there are morally significant differences between animals and plants, such as the capacity to feel pain. The question of whether animals can think is related to autonomy and has been discussed above. We now must consider how the philosophy should alter our practical expressions of love and actions in animals. We can think of ethical factors inside the organism and outside, and a summary of some factors for judging animal use is below. So this is the same list we've seen in the cross-cultural introduction to bioethics. Intrinsic ethical factors: pain, self-awareness, future planning, value of being alive, individual love of life. These are something inside an organism. Extrinsic ethical factors from outside: human necessity or desire, human sensitivity to animal suffering, brutality in animals, in humans, other animals, disapproval, religious status of animals. The concept of do no harm, which has a basis at a more fundamental level, the level of being alive, also argues against hurting any living organism if we have a love of life and a love for life. If we are going to harm life, a departure from the ideal of doing harm and love of life, it must be for a good motive. Such a motive might be survival, and we can see this as natural. Organisms consume and compete with others. Plants compete with each other for space to grow. Animals eat plants and other animals. Bacteria or fungus also compete for resources and space, sometimes killing other organisms and other times competing without direct killing. Destruction of nature and life by humans is caused by two human motives: necessity and desire. Basically, it's more ethically acceptable to cause harm if there is a necessity for survival than if it is only desire. The distinction is required even more as human desire continues to destroy the planet. Intrinsic values is something that exists without another assigning value to something. We could also consider intrinsic value as some experience which has value in itself without any instrumental reference by others. To perceive something of intrinsic value, we need to have an object of value. Whether it is a bone thrown to a dog or a ball thrown to a child, the object becomes of value. It has become of value even if we cannot be conscious of the value or talk about it, as you can see from the reaction to the animal to the removal of the object that they have interest in. The list above of the intrinsic values is not exhausted, but it lists the principal ideas that people have. I would be interested if you can think of other intrinsic ethical factors. We could think, for example, biochemical and basic issues of energy. Having an energy, biological energy might be another thing, but some people say this is the same thing as included by individual love of life. The love of life of bacteria comes from its biological energy. But you can think of other systems. The motive of using animals also alters the morality of their use in some religions, suggesting these concerns have a long history. Animal sacrifice for worship is used in Islam, but they would generally condemn scientific research of battery farming. Vivisection is allowed under circumstances where there is no pain or disfigurement and if other animals benefit. The use of animals in science is under the same moral codes as applied to humans. Even though animals possess a lower consciousness, Islam says, animal knows their own mode of prayer and psalm means singing, a voluntary act of praise. The killing of any breathing being, except for food or religious sacrifice, is high on the list of deadly sins. Hindus, Jains and Buddhists believe that we will be reborn as another living animal, which creates a bond of caring and compassion for animals. So they will reject animal sacrifice, even though the sacrifice of an animal won't kill what's essential in the reality of the soul of that animal. Animals also have a sense of play. Okay, there's a bear with a ball, a sense of play. Again, if you look in old-fashioned textbooks, you'll see the statements like animals don't play like human beings, but animals clearly do play. In fact, it's a common thing, and most human beings play with their pets, and pets may play with people. Christian scriptures and traditions accept animals do have valid claims upon us. Animals cannot be viewed simply as expendable raw materials for our designs. They do not simply serve us. The doctrine of creation is opposed to anthropocentric notions. The use of animal sacrifices does not mean animals should be sacrificed for selfish pursuits for humans. The practice of animal sacrifice was to bring God into focus of human hearts in the place of their own selfish desires, and was not necessary for Christians who refer to Christ as a sacrificial lamb. The Bible often mentions animals, as Israel was an agricultural community, as were most communities. God owns everything of creation, including all our cattle. He cares for them all. Okay, lots of Bible verses. Animals should also rest on the Sabbath and should be fed first before the farmer. However, early Christian theologians such as Aquinas regarded animals as irrational creatures that weren't directly possible of human friendships. The tradition of the Roman Catholic Church is to regard animals as means to human ends, and moral objections to cruelty on animals are more concerned with the fear that those inflicting pain on will contract habits of cruelty, something also seen in Immanuel Kant's writing. You shouldn't kick a dog, he said, because it will lead to brutality in human beings, not because the dog is feeling pain. On the other hand, the contrasting attitude of St. Francis of Assisi to talk of sister cows and brother dog is a picture which is appropriate as a biocentric view. Beyond the motive, another important criteria we use in judging the use of animals is avoiding inflicting pain. Some distinguish pain from suffering, but these are both departures from the ideal of avoiding harm. Suffering can be defined as prolonged pain of a certain intensity, and it's claimed that no individual can suffer who is incapable of experiencing pain. The capacity for suffering or enjoyment has been described as a prerequisite for having any interests. Judging pain is subjective, and there are parallels in the way animals and humans respond. Many of the neurotransmitters are similar between higher animals and humans. It's possible that animals do have a different quality of pain, as the frontal region of the cerebral cortex of humans is thought to be involved in feelings of anxiety, apprehension, and suffering components of pain. This region is much smaller in animals, and if surgically treated in humans, it can make them indifferent to pain. There are differences seen in the types of pain receptors. Some respond to mechanical stimuli, some to noxious heat or human irritant chemicals, and some to severe cold. The difference between pain in animals and responses to plants, which include electrical response like animals, is that the signal is only a signal, whereas pain is something after the reception and processing of the signal in the nervous system. Now I want to, if you can remember, the experiment we looked at yesterday in detail, the Nature commentary on recovery of lost memories. And if we look at the figure, now you may just remember this, that we had two models of mice. The Alzheimer's model, they don't have a memory. So when the mouse went into the cage and was given the electrical shock on its feet, when it was put back in the cage, the mouse with the Alzheimer's doesn't have a memory. It just is normal. However, with the mouse in the second cage, when it was put back in the cage, you can see even from the pictures, it's in fear. Its ears are down, and it will stay down. Now, when this mouse is put back in the cage, and it can't remember, it is playful. But when you give a light stimulation to turn on the expression of the gene for the memory, suddenly the mouse goes into the cage, even without a shock, is afraid. Now the neurons that it was using in the hippocampus are actually in the hippocampus have a central core of the brain, not in the cerebral cortex. So the hippocampus region was processing fear. So although I've said that we're talking about the cerebral cortex being where our anxiety comes from, the basic feeling of fear and remembering places which cause harm, which is fear, we're afraid of being harmed again, is much more fundamental in the right in the middle, okay, in the hippocampus. So it's really in the brain stem. So it's a very basal survival instinct. Now, was that fear? Is it the same as the anxiety? Well, the behavior of the mice to put down their ears and to look very nervous suggests there is something fundamental here going on. But again, these type of experiments, we need to know exactly what is happening. And with neuroscience, we can try and understand. Of course, with an unethical thing of causing pain to animals. But it may be useful. Now, we also have some human beings with certain disease which are useful models for us. Because they're useful models because they don't feel pain or don't feel fear. Okay. And then by looking at the parts of the brain which are damaged in those people, or the genes which are damaged in those people, we get some idea on the processing. But it's obviously not a healthy situation that you can't feel pain or that you don't have some degree of fear, because it's a protection mechanism. Okay, I've been burnt. If I've been burnt on the oven, it's a much stronger remedy for me not to put my hand on the oven again than just my mother telling me, don't put your hand on the oven. It's only when you're actually burnt by hot water that you know, don't put your hand in hot water, be careful. Okay? So it is healthy to have that fear. So that's but it's not good to inflict it. Okay. So we have just a couple more pages to go, and I will continue. We may all agree that animals can suffer, but the question is, how much does it matter? The figures in this book illustrate different ways of farming. Only in some cases we are forced to make a direct choice between human welfare and suffering of non-human animals. At the practical level, the feeling of pain is a major guiding principle for animal treatment. Another that may define boundaries of killing is if they have self-awareness, such as higher apes or dolphins. We need to consider the findings of animal studies on the level of self-awareness that some may possess. Our bioethics must have a basis from all data, including reasoning, philosophy, and biological knowledge. The creation of very diseased animals as models of human disease has become routine. In this case, we must try to balance the pain caused by the benefit, and this is not done well. There are agricultural reasons to make faster growing animals, or using animals to make specific products like bioreactors. To make a chicken lay an egg full of interferon, a protein that can treat some cancer, is novel, but is not beyond the daily use of animals. Ethically, if such proteins can be made in soybeans, in similar cost, it's better. And if the interferon can be delivered to the body by eating only beans, it would be a great advantage than having to eat through eggs. Again, we'd have to ask, or do we need to eat raw eggs if we have to eat get interferon through making it in eggs? So some, companies make their medical proteins in eggs, but actually making it in bean, we can eat a raw bean more easily than we can eat or a raw banana we can eat more easily than we can eat a raw egg. But if some raw eggs we do eat, in a certain, if it's very hygienic. Research to make edible vaccines is underway, and it could be very useful. If we can make edible vaccines in bananas, people could accept it. It can provide affordable, acceptable, and safe healthcare to most people in the world. The challenge is mainly the oral system, getting the vaccine from the gut into the bloodstream is the problem. Okay. Genetic engineering can also reduce the number of animals used in toxicity testing, because cloned or genetically similar modified animals have less variability in response to compounds or environment, reducing the number that would be used to give the same degree of statistical reliability in an experimental trial. This is not only more ethical from the perspective of a reduction of suffering, but it saves costs. It's ethically consistent to use lower organism cells or computer models if possible, and also to use human volunteers in epidemiological research. But if we need to use animals, then using genetically identical animals, you need less of them. A response to the ethical objection that it's wrong to cause pain could be to make animals that don't feel pain to use for experiments, food or other utilities for people. We could call such animals vegemals, vegetable animals. Because pain is a basic sensation, we may object to manipulating it permanently out of strains of animals. Okay, so my first paper I published on bioethics was proposing making vegemals, vegetable animals, and its ethical objections. These type of experiments involve altering the mental requirements of animals to suit our needs. In fact, the futuristic beings could be engineered to give consent. The motive is anthropocentric, and the means may not be interested with the life of animals themselves. However, if they did not suffer pain, then they could be regarded by many as being better off than the beings that do, and many organisms that are currently used for human benefit. So why not make animals that don't feel pain? Painless animals. And even animals like the talking cow at the restaurant at the end of the universe, who wants to be eaten. Eat me, because I was raised as my purpose in life, to eat me. Okay, so that's the future of animal genetic engineering, is making consenting animals that are conscious and want to be eaten. But if we really object to these experiments, we're forced away from arguments based on pain, in which capacity for a subject for sensation is a preeminent quality on which the attitudes towards the treatment of that being by others is based. If we object to these painless animals being made, it may be because we hold religious views according to which we should not grossly alter the creatures of the earth because it's unnatural. It could be based on each having a self, suffering being viewed as a threat to the characteristic worldly related activities which threatens the integrity of the self, as would the removal of sentience. Using the principle of love, we could ask if we're acting out of love for the animals or only for human desire. We may also have concerns about changing our own value of love to nature and others. But farming already treats animals as long-term property of humans, and decides when and how they come into existence, when and how they die, and their reproductive choices. There has been a long history of breeding of domestic animals targeted at different roles. This breeding has led to great diversity in the case of domestic dogs, with a range of sizes and behavioral traits. For several breeds, a past selection to become fighting dogs has meant that they may be easily aroused to fight, and that disproportionately be involved in attacks on other animals and human beings. In a US study between 1989 and 1994, there were 109 human deaths caused by dog attacks, with the most frequently involved breeds being Pit Bull Terriers, Rottweilers and German Shepherds. While there is a chance for misidentification of breeds, these studies in different countries have led to bans on particular breeds because of risks of a dangerous attack of children, and even the implantation of microchips for identification of already registered dogs that are classified as dangerous. Point systems for danger activity have also been established, and dogs accumulating too many points for bad behavior over a year are destroyed. Such breeding of aggressive dogs is a sad case of the treatment and manipulation of other life forms. It occurred before the invention of specific genetic engineering techniques, which could also be used to further increase pet variety. It would support a limit on the use of new technologies to make more behavioral modifications in order in other species to please the whims of people. And if you are a movie fan, you've seen the Jurassic World movie, the remake of Jurassic Park, called Jurassic World. It involved the prime villain in this was a genetically engineered dinosaur to become with a perfect predator without any moral conscience. So you see them going around just killing for fun all the other species. Okay, so this is something which you don't see in a natural animal. But killing for fun is something you see in some mutations, some mutants, sadly in some members of our species. Some people will continue to eat animals, and practical ethics must improve the ethical treatment for all animals. One area of particular concern is whether animals should be in a cage or a caged field or a caged box or factory farm. The main ethical question is confinement of animals such as veal calves is here the question of housing them. As we discussed, Switzerland has a law since 1992. In Sweden, in 1998 law. The possible boredom of animals in factory farms may be another ethical argument against their use, even if you just thought of pain of suffering was insufficient. It's interesting that many farmers in the International Survey express concerns about animal use. They clearly perceive images of what is a natural and just life for animals and what is not. And in fact, I have one of my former, two of my former students in Japan did research on animals, with interviewing animal farmers on their attitudes and relationships to animals. And the papers are published, they're quite interesting, on the relationships that different types of animal farmer had towards different types of animals. Figure 6.12 is an intensive pig farm. Actually, this one has more space than some. Some people keep their pigs as pets. They're intelligent animals. The movement is live, and life is limited to growing to become bacon and pork in this farm. So clearly, I think that's just an illustration of mechanization. It's also an illustration of why pork is cheap in the United States, okay, and in some countries. People need to decide much more how much more they're prepared to pay for better treatment of animals, such as the cost of eliminating battery farming or the costs in not using animal treatments that produce cheaper milk or meat, such as bovine growth hormone. The consequences of different communities involved in the agriculture of these decisions also needs to be considered. A variety of external factors which must also be considered with love. In conclusion, we can say that human love does extend to animals, but there are many questions about the limits that love should impose upon our action for the treatment of animals. We can also see signs of love in a number of animal species. I would suggest that it would be an unloving person who kills another being who can love, and we know enough about the minds and behavior of certain species to say that they can love others even across species boundaries. So at least we should reciprocate. Part of the empathy that we expect animals to show when setting criteria for moral reasoning, we should also show towards animals. Love is give and take, and also trying to do our best for others. We're often guilty of neglecting the interests of others, but species lines should no longer be so easily drawn at animals said to be lower than Homo sapiens. So that's the end of the chapter. It's open for questions and discussion now. Looks like we have some interesting discussions coming on the Skype. Any comments or questions? Maybe fairly intense, but any comments on chapter 6?
Before going to in comment,